Welcome back, everyone, to the EMT Spot. I'm Samuel Harrison, ready for another deep dive into the world of emergency medical care.
And I'm Olivia Harper, here to help guide you through some of the more fascinating ins and outs of being an EMT.
Today, we're looking at something that just might change how you look at your patient assessments from now on, the impact of environmental factors on blood pressure.
Oh, we're going way beyond just diet and stress here. We're talking about the big picture, how things like what season it is, or noise pollution, or even air quality can affect those BP readings.
So you're saying where our patients live and work can actually have a direct impact on their health.
You got it. It's about understanding that our environment plays a much bigger role in blood pressure than we often think. Let's start with seasonal changes, since we all experience that. You ever feel that kind of sluggishness in winter? Well, it turns out our blood pressure feels it too.
Hold on. Are you saying my winter laziness isn't just me wanting to hibernate? My blood pressure is actually affected by the cold.
It's not just you wanting to stay under the covers. Research actually shows that blood pressure tends to be higher in those colder months.
Okay, but why is that? I always thought it was because we're less active and maybe indulge a little more during the holidays.
Those are definitely factors, but there's more to it. When those temperatures drop, our blood vessels constrict, which increases peripheral resistance. It's like if you imagine your blood vessels as a network of roads, and then when it's cold, those roads get narrower, making it harder for blood to flow smoothly.
So it's like rush hour for our circulatory system.
Exactly. And to keep up with this resistance, the heart has to work harder, which then leads to higher blood pressure. But it's more than just a plumbing issue. Our body's systems kind of kick into overdrive to try to cope with the cold. So the sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response, that gets activated.
So even though we're not in any actual danger, our bodies are reacting as if we are, just because it's cold.
That's right. Like, our bodies are on high alert even when we're just trying to go about our day. And to make things even more complex, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which helps regulate blood pressure, that also goes into overdrive in the cold.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this adds up to higher blood pressure in the winter. But is it really a significant difference? We're only talking about a few points, right?
It can actually be more significant than you think. A drop of just 10 degrees Celsius can increase systolic blood pressure by up to 6.7 millimilli Hg. And here's the thing. This seasonal shift is linked to an increase in cardiovascular events during the winter.
So this isn't just some minor fluctuation. We're talking about a real impact on our patient's health.
Absolutely. And to make things worse, the effect seems to be even stronger as we age. Older patients are especially vulnerable to these seasonal changes.
That makes sense. Our bodies just aren't as resilient as we get older. But this is all pretty depressing. Are you telling me we just have to accept that our patient's blood pressure is going to be higher in the winter and there's nothing we can do?
Not at all. There are definitely things we can do. For example, adjusting indoor temperatures can make a big difference. And sometimes tweaking medication timing might be needed to really get that blood pressure under control.
So we need to be thinking about those environmental factors when we're assessing our patients, especially in the winter months.
Exactly. It's all about considering that bigger picture and how something as simple as the temperature can have a real impact on our patients.
Okay, so we talked about the cold, but what about other environmental factors? What about noise pollution? I mean, I work in a pretty busy city and it can get incredibly loud. Does all that noise actually affect blood pressure?
You're bringing up a really important point. Noise pollution isn't just annoying, it can actually be a health hazard, and it is linked to an increase in cardiovascular events, including high blood pressure.
Really? I knew noise could be bad for my sanity, but I had no idea it could affect my heart health.
It's true. Essentially, all that noise stresses out your body, which leads to what's called oxidative stress in your blood vessels. It's kind of like rust forming in your arteries.
Okay, that's a pretty vivid image. But how does noise actually cause that stress? What's the physiological mechanism there?
The main culprits are stress hormones, like cortisol. Noise disrupts your sleep, messes with your circadian rhythm, and bam, more stress hormones in your system.
So even if I manage to sleep through the noise, my body is still registering that stress.
Exactly. It's like your body's always on edge trying to deal with this sensory overload. And over time, this exposure can lead to what's called treatment-resistant hypertension.
Wait, are you saying that even medication might not work as well if someone is constantly exposed to loud noise?
That's what the research is suggesting, which is pretty alarming when you think about it.
All right, that's enough to make me want to move to a deserted island. But seriously, this noise thing is a real eye-opener. I bet most people don't even realize the impact it can have.
You're absolutely right. And it's not just about loud concerts or living next to construction. Studies show that even occupational noise above 85 decibels really increases the risk of hypertension.
So people who work in factories or on construction sites or even just loud offices could be at higher risk.
Exactly. And it's not just the workplace, it's our everyday environment, too. Even road traffic and aircraft noise above certain levels have a measurable impact.
So that daily commute could actually be contributing to the problem.
Unfortunately, yes. And like we talked about before, these effects can last a long time and could contribute to more serious health issues down the line.
Okay, so we've covered the cold and noise, but what about air pollution? We all know it's bad for our lungs, but how does it actually affect blood pressure?
Air pollution is a big one. It's like a silent attacker, just wreaking havoc on our cardiovascular system, and that includes our blood pressure.
So it's not just about breathing problems. It can directly impact our patient's cardiovascular health.
That's right. And the science is really clear about this. Air pollution contributes to hypertension.
Okay, so what is it about air pollution that's so harmful? We can't see it, but it's obviously doing some pretty nasty stuff inside our bodies.
There's a lot of harmful stuff in air pollution, but one of the biggest culprits is particulate matter, especially these tiny particles called PM2.5. These are so small they can get into our bloodstream.
PM 2.5, those are the ones that can basically bypass our body's natural defenses and go straight into our circulatory system.
Exactly. And once they're in there, they can trigger inflammation and oxidative stress. You remember that rust analogy? And they can make our arteries stiffen. All of that can contribute to high blood pressure.
It's kind of amazing how something we can't even see can have such a huge effect on our health.
It really is. And long-term exposure is even worse. It's a major risk factor for developing hypertension in the first place.
So it's not just about managing blood pressure that's already there, it's about preventing it from developing. And air pollution plays a big role in that.
Absolutely. And just like noise pollution, air pollution can also trigger that sympathetic nervous system, leading to that fight or flight response and even higher blood pressure.
It sounds like our bodies are under attack from these environmental stressors all the time.
In a way, yes. And it's important to remember that these effects can build up over time, even if we don't feel them right away.
Okay, I see a pattern here. We need to be thinking long-term and protecting ourselves and our patients from these environmental hazards. But are there any environmental factors that can actually have a good impact on blood pressure?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the most hopeful things about this whole topic. We're not just victims of our environment, we can shape it to be healthier. For instance, have you ever noticed how you just feel better when you're surrounded by nature?
Totally. There's something about being in a park or the woods that just kind of melts stress away. I always feel more relaxed and at ease.
Well, it turns out there's some science behind that feeling. Studies show that being in green spaces like parks and gardens and forests can actually lower blood pressure.
No way. So those nature walks aren't just good for my mental health, they're actually good for my heart too.
Exactly. Nature is powerful stuff. And it's not just about how it looks, it's about that fresh air and the sounds of nature and even the physical activity of being outdoors. It all has a calming effect.
I'm definitely going to start prescribing more nature walks for my patients. But how much time in nature do we need to actually see a difference in blood pressure?
That's a great question, and researchers are still working on that, but some studies show that even short amounts of time, like 10 or 20 minutes, can make a difference.
That's great. That makes it seem a lot more doable, even for people who live in cities. You don't have to go on some big hiking trip to get the benefits.
Exactly. And even if you can't get outside, even looking at pictures of nature or listening to nature sounds has a positive effect.
So bring on those plant walls and nature documentaries and calming sounds. But it's not just about being surrounded by nature, right? We also have to be mindful of what we're putting into our bodies.
Absolutely. Diet is key when it comes to blood pressure. But how do environmental factors come into play when we're talking about our patients' diets?
Well, what about food deserts? In some places, healthy and affordable food just isn't available.
That's a big factor. But it goes even further than that. Think about food marketing and advertising. Our patients are bombarded with messages about processed foods and sugary drinks and unhealthy snacks all the time.
It's true. It's tough to avoid those tempting ads, especially when they're at the checkout counter or during our favorite TV shows.
Right. And it's not a coincidence that these unhealthy foods are often the cheapest and easiest to get.
It's almost like our environment is working against us when we're trying to make healthy choices.
That's such an important point. We need to be aware of these influences and really work to help our patients resist them.
But how do we do that? It can feel like an uphill battle, especially when we're dealing with so much else in emergency situations.
Well, it starts by acknowledging that nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, and that's fine.
Well, it's good to hear. I know I have my weaknesses when it comes to junk food.
Me too. But what matters is making healthy choices most of the time. And that starts by being aware of those environmental triggers that make us want to eat unhealthy foods.
So knowing your weaknesses and planning, like packing healthy snacks instead of going to the vending machine.
Exactly. And being mindful of those food ads, don't let them trick you. They're made to make you crave unhealthy food even when you're not hungry.
It's like a mind game. It sounds like we need some serious mental strength to resist those tactics.
You're totally right. But here's the thing. It's not just about what each of us does individually. We also need to advocate for change on a larger scale.
What do you mean by that? You talking about regulating food advertising or making healthy foods more affordable and accessible?
Exactly. These are big issues that need big solutions. We need to work together to create an environment that supports healthy choices, not one that makes them harder.
It sounds like we need a huge shift in how we think about this, but it's definitely a worthy cause. We could prevent chronic diseases like hypertension and improve the health of our communities as a whole.
I couldn't agree more. It's about creating a world where healthy choices are the easy choices and where everyone has the resources they need to be healthy.
Okay, so we've looked at the negative side, how the environment can impact blood pressure, but it sounds like there's hope too. We can actually change our surroundings and make them work for us instead of against us.
Absolutely. It's not easy, but it's crucial. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to build a healthier world. What do you think is particularly important from our discussion today?
You know what really strikes me is how everything is connected. It's not just about one environmental factor on its own. It's about how they all work together and influence each other.
I agree completely, and it really shows how important it is to have a holistic approach to health. We need to consider all the environmental influences, from the air we breathe, the food we eat, to the social connections we have.
It's a good reminder that our health isn't just determined by our genes or our individual choices. The world around us plays a huge part.
That's a really powerful realization. It means that we have more control than we think. We can make choices, big and small, that can have a positive impact on our health and the health of our communities.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about, both for myself and for my work.
Me too. It's a reminder that we always need to keep learning and asking questions and working towards a healthier world. So we were just talking about how our surroundings can impact blood pressure in ways we might not even think about. Like we've seen how things like cold weather or even just a noisy commute can play a role.
And we even touched on those studies about how being out in nature can lower blood pressure.
It's like nature's prescription, right?
Exactly. A walk in the park can do wonders.
Yeah.
But I want to switch gears a bit and talk about something we don't always focus on in emergency care: the impact of our patients' socioeconomic environment.
Oh, that's a crucial aspect, and often one that really affects blood pressure.
When we say socioeconomic environment, what exactly do we mean?
We're talking about a whole bunch of things like income and education, what kind of job they have, and their access to things like healthcare and healthy food. All of these can seriously increase a patient's chances of developing hypertension.
So it's bigger than just individual choices or lifestyle.
Exactly. Think about a patient living in a neighborhood with high crime, no easy access to fresh food, and they're constantly dealing with stressors like air pollution and noise. That's a recipe for hypertension right there.
It sounds like an uphill battle for those patients.
It can be. And as EMTs, we need to be aware of these challenges and understand how they can affect our patients' health.
So how does this actually affect blood pressure? What's the connection?
Well, one major thing is chronic stress. Patients dealing with things like financial worries, job insecurity, or living in unsafe neighborhoods have higher levels of stress hormones like cortisol.
And those stress hormones can really mess with the cardiovascular system, right?
Absolutely. Over time, that chronic stress leads to inflammation, it damages blood vessels, and ultimately contributes to higher blood pressure.
It's like a vicious cycle. The stress makes the hypertension worse, and the hypertension probably makes the stress even worse.
Exactly. And then you have the issue of access to healthcare. Patients in lower socioeconomic groups often can't get preventative care and might not see a doctor until things get really bad.
Which means we might be seeing them in emergencies when their blood pressure is already sky high.
That's right. And we can't forget about diet either. We touched on food deserts earlier, but it's important to remember how hard it can be for some patients to get healthy food that they can actually afford.
It's not just about willpower or making bad choices. Sometimes the environment just makes it almost impossible to make healthy decisions.
Absolutely. When nutritious food is scarce and expensive, those cheaper, unhealthy options are often what people end up eating. And that can lead to a higher BMI, a higher risk of hypertension, and a lot of other problems.
It really paints a picture of the struggles some of our patients are up against.
It does. But as EMTs, it's our job to be aware of these social factors and approach our patients with empathy and understanding.
So it's about understanding that those blood pressure readings aren't just numbers on a screen. They're often a reflection of these really complex social and economic factors.
Exactly. And while we can't solve those big systemic problems ourselves, we can advocate for our patients and try to connect them with resources that might help.
It's about being more than just medical professionals. It's about being advocates and showing compassion.
I couldn't agree more. And this all circles back to a major theme we've been talking about, that connection between our health and our environment.
It's not just about our genes or individual choices. It's about this whole web of factors that influence our well-being.
And acknowledging that we all share a responsibility to create healthier environments for ourselves, our patients, and future generations.
That's a powerful thought. But before we get too philosophical here, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, that internal factor that influences blood pressure circadian rhythms.
Oh yes, our body's internal clock. It's amazing how much it can affect our bodies, including our blood pressure.
So tell me, how do those circadian rhythms actually play into blood pressure regulation?
Our bodies are incredibly complex, and blood pressure naturally goes up and down throughout the day. It usually dips to its lowest point when we're sleeping.
Okay, that makes sense. When we're asleep, our bodies are more relaxed, so it's natural that blood pressure would be lower too.
Right, but here's the thing. When we disrupt our circadian rhythm by doing things like shift work, dealing with jet lag, or even just staying up late scrolling on our phones, it throws off our natural blood pressure patterns.
So those late night studying or binge watching shows could be doing more than just making us tired the next day.
Exactly. Research has shown that people who constantly mess with their circadian rhythm tend to have higher blood pressure overall, and it makes them more likely to develop hypertension, too.
Wow, that's definitely a wake-up call. I guess those late nights can catch up with us more ways than one.
It's a good reminder for us all to really prioritize good sleep habits and keep a regular sleep schedule as much as possible.
That's easier said than done with our busy lives, but definitely something to work towards.
Speaking of disruptions, you mentioned that noise pollution can make those circadian rhythm problems even worse.
Yes, it's a double whammy. Remember those stress hormones we were discussing? Well, those sleep disturbances caused by noise just flood our bodies with even more of them.
So it's like a chain reaction. Noise disrupts sleep, which then throws off our circadian rhythm, leading to more stress hormones and ultimately higher blood pressure.
Exactly. And it shows how interconnected all these environmental factors are. They interact in such complex ways, and we might not even realize the consequences right away.
This is starting to sound pretty gloomy.
Yeah.
Are there any environmental factors that actually have a positive impact on blood pressure besides that nature exposure we talked about?
Of course. And it's actually connected to what we were just talking about with sleep. One of the best things we can do for healthy blood pressure is create an environment that helps us sleep well.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this sleep sanctuary we should be aiming for. Darkness is key. Our bodies naturally want to sleep when it's dark, but when we're exposed to light, especially blue light from our devices, it really messes with our sleep-wake cycle.
So that means no screens before bed. I know,
Yeah.
I know. Easier said than done.
It's a hard habit to break, but it's worth it for our sleep and our blood pressure.
Okay, so darkness is number one. What else can we do to create that perfect sleep environment?
Temperature is important. Most people sleep best when it's cool, somewhere around 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
I definitely prefer a cooler bedroom. But why does temperature matter so much for sleep?
Well, think about what happens as you fall asleep. Your body naturally cools down, and a cool room makes that process easier, which helps you fall asleep and stay asleep.
That makes sense. So if we're too warm, it actually makes it harder to get good sleep.
Exactly. And that can lead to fragmented sleep, which we already know can affect blood pressure.
Okay, darkness and cool temperatures, got it. What about noise? I'm a light sleeper, and even small sounds can wake me up.
Noise is a big one, especially for light sleepers. Even if we don't fully wake up, our bodies still react to those sounds, and it disrupts our sleep and raises those stress hormones.
So it's not just about sleeping through the night. It's about making sure your bedroom is really peaceful and quiet.
You got it. And there are some easy things you can do, like using white noise machines, earplugs, or even just arranging your furniture to block out noise from outside. Every little bit counts.
This is great advice, but let's be real here. A lot of our patients, especially those struggling financially, might not have the resources or even the ability to create this ideal sleep environment.
That's so true. And it highlights the importance of addressing those social and economic factors we talked about earlier. When people are barely making ends meet or living in unsafe places, creating a peaceful sleep space might just not be possible.
It really shows how much those environmental factors and individual circumstances are intertwined.
Exactly. It reminds us that we need to be understanding and sensitive with each patient, recognizing that things outside their control can affect their health.
So it's about meeting our patients where they are and helping them find strategies that work for their situation and resources.
Absolutely. And speaking up for policies and resources that can help create healthier environments for everyone, no matter their background.
Well said. Now, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought-provoking idea before we wrap up today. We've talked a lot about how our environment affects blood pressure, but what if it goes the other way too?
What do you mean?
I'm wondering if our blood pressure, or rather how healthy our cardiovascular system is, could actually influence our environment.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way before.
Well, think about it. When our blood pressure is under control, we generally feel better, don't we? We have more energy, we handle stress better, and we're more likely to do the things we enjoy.
I see what you mean. It's like a positive feedback loop. When we feel good physically, we're more likely to make healthy choices, be more active, and create a more positive environment for ourselves.
Right. And those good choices can then spread out and influence our families and communities and maybe even the world around us.
It's like a chain reaction of good health.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that taking care of our cardiovascular health isn't just about ourselves. It's about creating a healthier and more vibrant world for everyone.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Taking care of our heart health isn't just about avoiding disease, it's about contributing to a better world. So we've spent this whole episode talking about how much our surroundings can affect our blood pressure. We've seen how everything from seasonal changes to chronic noise and air pollution can really make a difference.
It's been a real eye-opener, and it just shows how important it is to look at the whole picture when we're assessing our patients.
Absolutely. It's not just about taking those vital signs. It's about understanding the bigger picture, their environment, their individual story.
Speaking of stories, I think one of the most fascinating things we've discussed today is this idea that our health, specifically our cardiovascular health, can actually shape our environment in return.
Oh, that's right. We talked about how managing blood pressure can have this ripple effect, creating positive changes in our lives and our communities.
It's like this positive feedback loop. When we feel good physically, we tend to make healthier choices, we're more active, we build stronger relationships.
Exactly. And those healthy choices can then influence our families, our communities, maybe even the whole world.
It's a powerful reminder that taking care of our hearts isn't just about ourselves. It's about creating a healthier world for everyone.
That's such a great point. It really makes you realize that taking care of our cardiovascular health is about more than just lowering our risk of disease. It's about making the world a better place.
Well said. So as we wrap up this episode of the EMT Spot, I want to leave our listeners with a few key things to think about.
Let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today.
First, remember that the environment really does play a significant role in blood pressure. It's not just about genes or lifestyle. Things like temperature, noise, air quality, and whether or not people have access to healthy food can all affect those numbers.
Right. And second, be mindful of those social and economic factors that can lead to hypertension. Approach your patients with empathy, and remember that sometimes things outside their control make it harder to manage their health.
Absolutely. Third, prioritize sleep. Make sure you're creating a good sleep environment for yourself and encourage your patients to do the same. A good night's sleep is essential for regulating blood pressure and for overall health.
And lastly, don't forget that everything is connected. Our health is not just about us, it's about our families, communities, and the planet. By taking care of ourselves, we're helping to create a healthier world for everyone.
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the impact of environmental factors on blood pressure.
We're so glad you joined us.
I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
Be sure to subscribe to the EMT Spot for more insights into the world of emergency medical care. And as always, like, comment, and share this episode with anyone who might be interested. We'll see you next week for another deep dive.